Yeah, it continues to impress. So Bob has had a very long industrious career, has been a leader in the water field, environmental field in California, that I don't even think that we can grasp the impact that Bob's had on the water environment here in California. So yeah, we're just going to have a conversation. Um, and Bob, one of the things that I remember when I first met you at WBA, we talked a lot about the water environment, of course. And one of the things that struck me is certainly your energy and enthusiasm, your brilliance in some of the solutions to our water issues, which, we've had for decades now and continue to have. And I also recall you saying just the effort that it takes to change people's minds about, the right approach to the water environment. And I guess we do want to talk about kind of your crystal balling and seeing what the future might hold, but to let folks know a little bit about your background and your influence in the water recycling endeavors and conveying water throughout the state. So maybe you can just touch a little bit on your role in water reuse in the early days. I don't know if you want to touch on the Delta water program, but certainly water reuse. I think it's worthwhile for folks to hear about your influence there.
Well, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Dennis, for inviting me. So water recycling has been part of my career for over 50 years. So let me cite a little story that happened about 50 years ago. At a time when it was before the Clean Water Act and before much of the efforts of cleaning up wastewater to the extent that we now enjoy. So I had the pleasure of working in an operations supervisorial role for LA County Sand Districts. And this was an event. It was the annual tour of the board of directors to the wastewater facilities to see how great a job we were doing. Now, recognizing that the board of directors was not the typical 5-member board, it was all the political leaders of LA County, the mayors, the council members, and others served on. So it was a big body of the political class. And there was a tour of the main treatment plant that collected the wastewater from LA County and discharged it into the ocean. And so all the precautions, of course, of a big event, washing down everything, wiping down the handrails and everything. But one of my first person that I supervised was asked to be a tour guide. And so he did that. He went on a tour. And that was a great day. But about a week or so later, I got summoned into the general manager's office. The first and only time in my 7-year career that I was summoned to his office. And I was reprimanded for this young man taking the board of directors out to the final floor bay before the water was pumped out into the ocean. Well, the water at that point had received treatment, but it looked like 300 million gallons a day of black coffee. And there must have been a political reaction that came from observing what we thought was the standard practice of the day. So I was reprimanded for what was I doing that would cause this young man to think that he could take the board of directors out to see the final effluent. That also caused me then to think about one of my responsibilities was the supervision of the Whittier Narrows Water Reclamation Plant, which was an upstream diversified facility, decentralized in today's terms. that produce water to high quality, discharge it into a riverbed, which percolated in the groundwater basin. So that was an operating water recycling facility. And I was confronted then with this dilemma. The standard practice for LA County, primary treatment, black water going to the ocean, or we had the opportunity to clean up the water and reuse it. I now realize that that's when I was convicted probably was not, convinced that we had the engineering know-how and operational knowledge of how to clean up the water to be beneficial use. And I then have devoted my career for that purpose rather than just the standard norm. So with that background, throughout my career after that, and 20 years later, got involved with some people that were interested in promoting water recycling. And 6 of us got together and combined the resources of 2 entities, one that was headquartered in LA County, the other in San Diego County. They realized that the 2 should be working together rather than as competing forces, if you will. And we sat down in hotel rooms and others and drafted up an operating plan and bylaws to create water reuse, with a focus of not only the policy questions, but also the regulatory scientific questions. So it became a combined policy and, if you will, science engineering emphasis with that went forward. And so 1990, the organization Water Reuse was formed, created memberships, and it was like we were a bunch of religious zealots out there selling the benefits of water reuse, and which was a challenge at the time. So one of the satisfactions, of course, now is that it's included in many, many presentations and policies say this is what we need to do in order to supplement our water supplies. So that's where it is today. It is an ongoing program of promoting technology and policy and other questions all related to water recycling.
Yeah, when I remember the very early days of water reuse, I had the honor of knowing you then, and what it was then and what it is today. I think that's something that you should be very proud of. I think you are. And I wanted to bring that up for folks here on this call and in this conference, because I don't think that, a lot of people know that you were one of the, initiators of water reuse. And what it is today is phenomenal. It does really good work.
Well, interestingly, I also realized that of the 6 of us that got together and hammered it out in a very short period of time, 3 of us had the background of LA County sanitation districts.
Ah, nice. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, water recycling obviously has been around for millennia, but there's to do a concerted water recycling effort there's so many hurdles that still need to be overcome, and it's a little mind-boggling that we're still struggling so much in that arena. And maybe you can talk a little bit about some of your thoughts about moving it forward. How do we move it forward? Especially we keep undergoing drought after drought and climate change, and I mean we can't wait any longer.
Well, moving it forward is I have characterized any water reuse project. First of all, let me put it this way. Every water reuse project is a local project. It's a local community project. We talk about the global questions, but the actual implementation requires local acceptance, local support, leadership, And so it just takes the time. And what is the real driving force for water reuse? It's not a historic fact. I would say very few do people go up to a permit counter, such as your agency, and say, I want a connection for a water recycling. Maybe that's happening now, but it hasn't been the case. It's kind of a bit on the sideline. So it requires a change in mindset. And first of all, the first mindset is we in our Western US society have put a great deal of emphasis on sanitation. You know, starting from age 1 and onwards, it's about the importance of sanitary conditions and therefore the separation of the waste from washing hands. So our general population has been trained being adverse to the waste product. And so when we talk about water recycling, taking water out of waste, we got to overcome that basic cultural bias, if you will. And it's all understandable, but it's how do we communicate that we are so good at being engineers and operators that we can overcome that bias. And that's where it gets back to a trust factor and an organizational needs. I do think that the water resiliency situation that we're talking about provides that force. It becomes a water resource discussion, not a waste treatment discussion. We need the water. How do we develop these programs to provide the additional water on a local basis? I mean, there was, and it's interesting is that wherever a community does implement and is treating and delivering water, it's generally accepted. It's the anticipation of what it would be like that creates the controversy. In your own area there in Redwood City, the initial discussions, it was very controversial, very politically challenged. It took a year or two of repeated conversations with the city of Redwood City, then made the determination the water would be safe, implemented, and it's been operating and successfully operating.
Right. Yeah, and not only that, so definitely the general public, but even the professionals in the industry, there's unfortunately still a lot of what I perceive as a lot of hurdles put up by agencies, and whether it's turf wars or don't step over this line because this is my territory type thing. Certainly between water purveyors, wastewater treatment, that exists to larger and smaller degrees,
Well, so the water purveyor, the water utilities have their culture and background. The wastewater entities have their culture and background. And they're not, even though they're all trained in water and many of them are trained in the professional trades of engineering and management, et cetera, the cultural backgrounds are different.
Yes.
And so that leads to difficulties and challenges. I'll just put it, water utilities are looking for a reliable long-term water supply at the lowest cost possible to their customers. And tied to resource contracts or water rights. Wastewater culture is mandated to clean up the waste and discharge it into the environment. And if you don't do a good enough job, subject to penalties and maybe even jail. And so those two cultures don't don't overlap well. Even agencies that have both functions.
Right.
One function would be on the third floor. The other function would be on the fourth floor, and the elevators don't work between the two floors. I mean, it's amazing to me that the conversations that haven't happened, and so but they need to be forced to happen. And what becomes the overriding force? And I've concluded it's the water resources, the overriding force. The recognition now that we need the water.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, even the work that we're doing at Silicon Valley Clean Water, you know, the driving force is the need for water. There's just flat out a need for water, and I think you're spot on that is the water resource is the driving force here. I know we have a very short amount of time, so you know the one thing that we had talked about early on as we were talking about this interview is I want to get Bob's vision of your crystal balling of where this might go moving forward, and maybe just some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. So I know that there's a lot of emphasis with this group and later on in the program about on-site wastewater treatment by private entities. And that has been a topic of controversy, again, cultural differences. But I think it's part of the equation, part of the portfolio for water supply. But what isn't readily available is a known pathway for the regulations. So the first part, and this goes back to water use, is the need for a statewide standard based upon public health science. So that the regulation applies in La Jolla, Santa Monica, Palo Alto, San Jose, and it's all science-based. One of the benefits of COVID, and this may be the only one, is the recognition of public health needs, re-emphasizing public health takes precedence over politics, economy, and so forth. So on the on-site treatment things, it needs to be a statewide standard based upon protection of the public health in those facilities, which predominantly may be just employees or visitors or management or whatever, but it still is, the standard has to be established on a statewide basis. I know that Paula Keogh has been instrumental in trying to establish such standards, and it's a challenge to try to get everyone to agree on what that is. The other part is also to establish a regulatory framework that for a developer to want to have an on-site system, they may not understand what it takes to get approval from the variety of agencies that are involved in approving of such as, including your own agency, including your own sign off on a particular project. That isn't known, it's not known, it's not part of the practice, it's not understood. And so and that's back to the point of every situation is local, with the local jurisdictions that are involved have to be a part of the planning before somebody goes out and makes the investment, buys something, and then finds out, oops, I didn't include this. And that's an embarrassment and frustration to everyone. So I think that more attention needs to be given to understanding what the regulatory framework is for developers who want to make the investment to go through. You know, I've been in the sewage business all my career, and now that I'm out of it to some extent, it makes me wonder as to why would someone want to purposely make an investment in their own basement for a sewage business, you know. But that's their decision to make. But that's where the regulatory framework, the public health standards have got to come into play so that it's well known before they start making the investment. let's,
Yeah.
so on another bigger picture, and maybe to the audience of Silicon Valley, um, we watch news every night, which is unfortunate, but we do. But part of the news is the weather forecasts and how sophisticated that they are becoming. So now, like last night, got a picture, got a model projection of the weather pattern, storm clouds coming in, and predicting the amount of precipitation that's going to fall in particular communities. Very sophisticated modeling, and presumably they're getting more and more accurate. But what if we were to take, if somebody were to take that technology and apply it over each watershed? So let's just take it, say, over the Hetch Hetchy watershed as an example. And in real time, be able to make a prediction of what the runoff would be at that particular point in time that would go into the reservoirs. And then the reservoir managers could have a real-time projection of the water supply rather than relying on the historic statistics that have been pointed out are changing. So that it could be a mass data management programming with lots of stuff, which I don't fully understand. But wouldn't it be amazing if such a program could be developed where it would fall into the efficiency category, efficiency of operations of reservoirs and what has to be released and so forth. So that's that would take years of development and practice, but it was something to toss out there. I guess my last point is about water resiliency. We haven't talked about the delta situation, and the amount of water flows through the delta and that can be extracted either upstream or downstream. And that situation continues to play itself out. And it's so controversial. I'm not sure that there will be enough consensus to say that we can continue to rely on the delta for so many millions of acre feet of water a year. That's going to be under constant challenge. And therefore, it leads to each local community to figure out their own water supply portfolio, which is the whole menu of options. And it puts it in a change from the state-driven supply to local derived supplies, and therefore the collaboration and the regional efforts that are necessary to do that. I think the trend is in that direction. These types of programs helpful, but I think that it's a change in direction of where water resource managers will be looking. It's going to be more and more local derived decision making and investment.
I agree. I think where the state could really have a big play in this is just, as you said, statewide standards and the regulatory framework, and then the local agencies can take it from there. But I totally agree with you on that front.
Well, I just wanted to jump in and be the bearer of overtime.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, first off, Teresa and Bob, I want to thank you for a really interesting conversation. And Bob, you've teed up a number of issues and questions. We do have Paula coming on probably within the hour to talk about the state of regulations and initiatives, both local and statewide and national. So that is exactly what she's going to be kind of updating us on. And it's the news you can use segment. And as well as Cora Camamere from Pacific Institute, actually prior to Paula. The issue you brought up with say, reservoir management and more predictive information as far as just in terms of inputs to that is quite interesting. I was wondering actually about the LiDAR installations and some of that and how that can come to play with that. I mean, because that is supposed to be able to, monitor streams, in terms of flow, as well. But in terms of overall water usage things, we are going to have a lot of discussion about that tomorrow as well. So it was funny. I had two thoughts about this. How you were anticipating the programming that is coming up, and also like next time I think we're just going to have to devote a day. And Teresa, if maybe you'd spare a whole day, and we'll just just have you on the program and go through these issues. But we're going to take a break for now, and but keep in mind a lot of the issues you raised. I know, Bob, you're always someone I hear and I always want to hear more of, and so I was happy to try to get this particular item together, although it's a bit short as it turns out. So anyway, thank you very much, Teresa, for doing this, and Mr. Whitley, thank you very much.